In a variety of Spider-Man comics, Peter Parker has needed a job to pay his bills while balancing his life as a superhero. The most common job he's had was a freelance photographer for the Daily Bugle, taking pictures of himself. This has been repeatedly used for numerous animated shows, including 1967 Spider-Man, Spider-Man the Animated Series, Spider-Man the New Animated Series, and Spectacular Spider-Man. What's funny is, Jameson didn't know the guy he's been bad-mouthing was working for him his whole life. However, what many people who only watch the films or TV shows don't know is that Peter's had multiple jobs besides photography and other comics as well. As a result, I'm going to list every career and explain them. First up, a high school teacher. In 1999's Amazing Spider-Man number 31 by J. Michael Straczynski and John Romita Jr., Peter found a job as a science teacher in his old high school, Midtown High. It begins with him telling Aunt May he went there recently and felt the memories of his life before and after he got his powers. But now that he's an adult, he describes it as fallen on hard times, fraying at the edges, covered in graffiti. I get the feeling that now it's an even tougher place for kids who are, well, like I was that age, alone. Aunt May said she spoke with Mrs. Champfer, who told her that her son Ronald was a substitute teacher. One of the things he said was that the school was looking for professionals to come in and teach a class once or twice a week. Peter believes she was suggesting something to him, but she argued she never was. And if she did, it was more like his sense of fairness that was telling him that the students aren't getting the same breaks as he did and was thinking of repaying that. At the end of the issue, he goes to Midtown High and applies for the job. This job makes sense for him because he was a straight-A student, passionate about science, and it allowed him to help his students in similar situations as himself when he was a teenager. Unfortunately, due to his duties as Spider-Man, he often had to call in sick and only worked there once or twice. Second, Tony Stark's assistant. After many years of occasional team-ups with the Avengers, Tony Stark, aka Iron Man, hired Peter to be his personal assistant, invited him to move into Avengers Tower with Mary Jane and Aunt May, and became a mentor to the web-slinger. In 1999's Amazing Spider-Man number 529, Tony gifted Peter the iconic red and gold Iron Spider costume, which gave him a few more abilities, such as gliding with web wings and able to take bullets without getting hurt. At the end of the issue, Tony explains to Peter that he, his wife, and aunt are like family to him and offered him to be his full-time protege. So Peter agreed, and they went on a mission to Washington together. Of course, I haven't read the entire comic of Civil War, but from what I'm aware of, even though Peter and Tony's relationship fell during that time, the latter still offered to pay him to join a new Avengers team. When it comes to Peter's relationship with Stark in the MCU, some people criticize Tom Holland's portrayal for supposedly over-relying on him, and another superhero mentoring him reaches a point where he looks more like a sidekick than a superhero. But whether you're a Raimi patron or an MCU patron, this'll come off as a big surprise. In various comic book timelines, Spider-Man has always been a fan of other superheroes and even tried to join them in some of these worlds. In an article called Iron Man and Spider-Man's Relationship is Actually Based on the Comics on Screen Rant, it highlights 3 storylines that inspired the film Homecoming. The first is Amazing Spider-Man Annual number 3. Though he hasn't become an official member of the Avengers until 2004's The New Avengers, in this 1966 issue, he did at least attempt to join them, like when he tried to join the Fantastic Four in 1963's Amazing Spider-Man number 1. You know how throughout Homecoming, Peter tries to prove himself to Tony to become an official member of the Earth's Mightiest Heroes? That's what Stan Lee's Spider-Man did as well. They laid out a test for him, which was to bring the Hulk back to Avengers Tower. When he does, however, Hulk turns back into Bruce Banner, and he reveals he has very little control over his transformations, and his memory gets hazy at times. This caused Spider-Man to realize that he actually needs help, not hatred. Understanding, not punishment. So he lets Hulk go, tells the Avengers he couldn't find him, and decides to pass on joining their team. In Homecoming, Spider-Man turns in the Vulture, who was a monster of Tony's own creation, and although Spider-Man passes the test, he decides to turn down the invitation of joining the Avengers. This moment is similar to Annual Number 3 because in both scenarios, Peter realizes the moral grayness of being an Avenger. In the MCU, he decides he just wants to be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man because as a 15-year-old kid, he's not ready to deal with moral difficulties that Iron Man, as a billionaire and part of a strike team, deals with. So both the comic and the movie end on a thematic level of choosing to helping everyday people on the streets as a more manageable responsibility to bear. The second is the 1999 comic, which we've highlighted a couple minutes ago. Even the following issue, number 530, part 2 of Mr. Parker Goes to Washington. Peter accompanies Tony to Washington, and they go to a court proceeding about the Superhero Registration Act. One of the greater things than his usual neighborhood crime-fighting style Peter deals with is hyper-politicized critiques of superhero acts led by the Washington elites. Homecoming, on the other hand, explores Spider-Man as a middle-class neighborhood-defending hero who gets whisked away from his comfort zone and taken under Iron Man's wing. As a result, in both stories, Peter is a fish out of water to Iron Man. These comics are also why Tom Holland calls him Mr. Stark. Finally, Ultimate Spider-Man, aka Earth 1610, by Brian Bendis. Arguably the biggest inspiration for their relationship in the MCU, Tom Holland's Peter Parker is a teenager, and RDJ's Tony Stark is a more experienced superhero. Ultimate Spider-Man is also depicted as naive in the first year of his career, like Tom Holland's Spider-Man is, as seen in Homecoming. RDJ's Iron Man and Ultimate Iron Man even saw potential in him, and while their relationship wasn't exactly father and son-like in the Ultimate books, as in the MCU, the movie at least took the attribute of a super authority overseeing the young hero's every move for its plot. Lastly, the most likely prominent theme in the Ultimate comics is Peter's disappointment with some adults and their capabilities. He basically learns there's an almost inescapable corruption to those who have great power, but not great responsibility. A trait that MCU Peter has when Vulture lectures him about the crooked jurisdiction run by Iron Man and the Avengers. Simply put, MCU Spider-Man is comic accurate, just in a different way. Third, my personal favorite, web designer. The Ultimate Spider-Man comic book series was a reimagining of the characters from the early 1960s, blending in with the early 2000s. While these comics have many similarities with Stan Lee's original run, they also have many differences around the characters. For example, Peter does get a job at the Daily Bugle, but it's not photography. Instead, it's web designing, or sometimes called web managing. This is the action of planning, conceptualizing, and creating visual concepts for websites, such as layout, color, and image. In Ultimate Spider-Man number 8, he did submit pictures of himself in costume, but Jameson kept calling them crap and offered him $50. Before he does, however, everyone overheard Betty Brant lashing out while she struggles to construct the Daily Bugle's website, and Peter offers to help her fix her recursive problem using a conditional statement. So Jameson decides to hire him. In my opinion, this is a very underrated career, and I think it should be adapted in animation or film because it's refreshing and creative from Peter Parker's usual career path. At least that's what I would like to experiment with if I made my own animated adaptation. Though I think it was mentioned once in Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes, but that show is more about Captain America, Iron Man, Black Widow, and everybody else, not much about Spider-Man. So I'd like to show people who don't read as much comics that he can have different career paths besides photography. Fourth, CEO. During the Superior Spider-Man era, Otto Octavius took over Peter Parker's body, and Peter, supposedly being in Otto's, reminded him with great power comes great responsibility before he presumably died. However, it was revealed that Peter's consciousness has always lived on and kept trying to reach out and reason with Otto. Around the same time, he established the organization of Parker Industries. I haven't quite read those books, but from what I've seen, his ideas were to cure his enemies, create an advanced villain prison, artificial limbs, and webware smartwatches. Eventually, Peter got his body back, changed into his classic costume, and continued running the business. That was until he runs into Doc Ock in a new cloned body as Superior Octopus, along with Hydra agents, in an attempt to take it back. In the end, he decided it was best to shut down the company and encouraged the employees to destroy all technology related to it. Reactions to Superior Spider-Man were mixed. Fans usually don't like the idea of killing Peter Parker to have someone replace him with, as he was a beloved character for so many years. And I agree with that. But it was nice to know he returned, though it probably started with outcry from the fan base. As a CEO, it might be a unique concept for the character, but what results backlash from fans is usually its execution. Some fans felt it was way too far from his usual friendly neighborhood image, and that he was too similar to Tony Stark, while some liked it, or at least didn't mind it, because they were tired of Peter being poor and unsuccessful. But again, this all started with Otto, Octavius in Peter's body, not exactly Peter himself. So, I'm a little conflicted on this. I wouldn't mind him maybe Peter running a small business in New York, but other enterprises around the world is probably a lot and requires more dedication and responsibility. I understand the unhappiness some people have with Dan Slott, but if it's as far as harassment, I'd say the backlash is kinda too much, and I don't think he's a bad writer. I've read 2005's Spider-Man and the Human Torch miniseries, and Slott nailed it with that. I even made a video essay called The Human Torch, Spider-Man's True Best Friend, where I've highlighted some of the pages to show their interactions. Heck, he was even one of the writers for Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions, and that game was good. But for how Superior Spider-Man was written, some argue that Peter was apparently too irresponsible when he stole Octavius' work. Peter pretended he did all of it, and took credit for Otto's successes in order to get rich. So I don't think Dan Slott is inherently a bad writer, just flawed. That's the best conclusion I've got. Fourth, Horizon Labs associate. In 1999's Amazing Spider-Man number 648 by Dan Slott and Humberto Ramos, Marla Jameson makes an appointment with Peter Parker to meet Max Modal, CEO of Horizon Labs and one of his role models. Peter was given a tour around the building, helped Sanjani Jaffries fix her experiment gone wrong, and passed a pop quiz with answers based on his memories of how he fought his enemies, which resulted him getting a job there. This all led him to creating new inventions based on what he created as Spider-Man. By the time Otto Octavius took over Peter's body, he resigned to establish Parker Industries. After Mayor J. Jonah Jameson shut it down because of a time travel occurrence, Liz Allen's Allen Chemical acquired many of its remaining assets, which also merged with products from Oscorp and became Alchemax. The first time I found out about Horizon Labs was from the 2017 animated series, Marvel's Spider-Man, titled Horizon High School. But going back and doing research, I now know where that came from. This career makes sense just as much as being a high school teacher, given his intelligence and creativity. I had a similar idea, only based on going even further back to the 1960s. Peter gets a job at the Baxter Building as a scientist, and joins the Fantastic Four, but they don't exactly become the Fantastic Five. I thought it would be a cool and fun way to recapture their relationship. Maybe he could also make some new gadgets or suits he'll need to defeat certain villains. Fifth, advertising spokesman. In 1963's Amazing Spider-Man number 126 by Jerry Conway and Ross Andrew, two advertisers, Carter and Lombardo, approached him with the idea of promoting their new non-polluting car engine. Though reluctant at first, he later agreed in the hopes of paying his rent. Looking for ideas, he asked the Fantastic Four's Human Torch for assistance of an idea called the Spider-Mobile. So they are briefly seen building it in number 127, and finally, in number 130, it was finished. Spider-Man never had a license, nor did he know how to drive, so Johnny had to help him out. Spidey kept using this car on various missions until number 141, where the police were chasing him, and he escaped them at a pier, thinking he was driving through an alley. The Spider-Mobile fell in the Hudson River. The web-slinger himself jumped out and hid from the police before he walks out of the situation. Later in number 160, it was revealed that the Tinkerer modified the car's controls and used it to destroy Spider-Man. He picks up the car to prevent it from moving forward. Tinkerer changed it to reverse. Spidey jumps into it to dodge the attack, and it finally ran into a wall, knocking Tinkerer out. At the end, Spider-Man returns the damaged car to Carter and Lombardo, completely quitting the advertisement. I don't really have much to say on this, other than I wouldn't be surprised if this inspired a lot of real-life merch of Spider-Man himself, with a car coming with it. 6th, Bodyguard. In 1999's Amazing Spider-Man number 52, mob boss Morris Forelli hired Spider-Man to protect him from the gamma-irradiated villain Digger. He offered to pay Spidey $10,000 a day as long as nothing illegal was involved, and so he agreed. He knew Forelli was a criminal, but he chose to protect him from someone targeting him because that's who he is as a hero. One day in number 54, when Digger attacked Forelli's house, Spider-Man defeated them in the sewer by making him use up their energy. After that, Detective William Lamont replayed a recording of Forelli himself, confirming he was the one who murdered the people who became the Hulk-like figure thanks to a hidden microphone Spider-Man kept under his costume, which led to Forelli's arrest. The end of the comic reveals that Peter used all the money to build a library to honor Gwen Stacy's memory. I gotta admit, it was pretty smart of him to trick Forelli to reveal the evidence of what caused the dawn of Digger in the first place. Spidey may have been willing to help stop them, but that doesn't mean he wasn't going to arrest him as well. Otherwise, that probably would have made him look like a criminal as well, or somehow associated with him. 7th, Threats and Menace streamer. In 2018's Amazing Spider-Man by Nick Spencer and Patrick Gleason, former Daily Bugle employees Jonah Jameson and Nora Winters created an organization they call Threats and Menace. It's mentioned in number 61 that Jameson had a podcast with Spider-Man, and it turned out to be popular. So they introduced a new white and blue costume made of unstable molecules designed to make him faster and stronger, and cameras built in the lenses like a VR headset. This was designed to broadcast live fights Spider-Man had with Shocker, Hydro-Man, and Speed Demon. These helped improve Spider-Man's image, but later in number 66, it was revealed he decided to quit when he found the last fragment of the Lifeline tablet. His reasons were need for privacy, concerns of manipulating him, and to reclaim his former image, and how his identity was understood by the public, much to Jameson's annoyance. I think on paper, it would be an interesting idea for Spider-Man to make monetized streams in his early days as a superhero. Of course, it would be risky of giving away his identity, but since I mentioned early days, I think it could be a fresh take for Peter to learn about responsibility in the late 2010s or 2020s. 8th, and the last job I'd like to highlight in depth, an Avenger. In the original comics, Spider-Man tried to join the Fantastic Four, hoping to make a living in crime fighting. This time, in Jonathan Hickman's Avengers Volume 5, I think it was, from the year 2012, Captain America and Iron Man were starting a new Avengers team, different from the previous one. In issue number 2, there's a shot where Iron Man tells Spider-Man they have money, implying the latter would get paid for his work, which he was grateful for. That was until later on he learned they couldn't pay him because he wouldn't tell them his identity. I haven't quite read the series myself, so I'm going to reference some analyses from Comic Drake and other people. Peter already had a job at Horizon Labs at the time, which some would find odd if he was struggling with his bills. It was also apparent that Doc Ock had already taken over his body, and his attitude is what caused him to quit working for the Avengers. Normally, when other heroes find out about his identity, they keep his secret from the public, but in this circumstance, this took place at some point after One More Day, one of Marvel's most controversial stories, where Peter and Mary Jane make a deal with Mephisto to sacrifice their marriage to save Aunt May, and all the heroes he worked with would forget his identity. Personally, I don't really have an issue with Peter getting a job as a paid Avenger, but I disagree with how it was executed in this arc. If I was making a series based on this, the changes I would make would be Peter Parker being himself, not taken over by Ock, him struggling to find a job, the Avengers know his real name, they promise not to reveal it to the public, and he does get paid for his work. It's kinda like the student scientist with the Fantastic Four I mentioned. Sure, Peter Parker does have struggles and whatnot, but in the end, he needs something to keep him motivated other than with great power comes great responsibility, and he's allowed to have more than one role model besides Uncle Ben. Where people who think like this otherwise, they usually get it from the Raimi films, where they couldn't use other heroes due to copyright issues. There are other career paths I could get into the details of, but I feel like some of them are just too similar to the others I've already highlighted. But I can still give a short description from what I've seen in articles. Of course, there's the TV performer, where he used to wrestle and perform stunts, which was an early era of using his powers. That was until he let the thief go, he murdered Uncle Ben, and Spidey finally caught him, which led him to becoming a superhero. In Bill Manto and Jim Mooney's Spectacular Spider-Man number 32, he briefly became a science researcher, working alongside Dr. Connors after he graduated from Empire State. This also occurred during the Clone Saga in the 90s, where Peter and Mary Jane were married, and they moved to Portland, Oregon for a while, as Ben Reilly took over the alias of Spider-Man. In Dan Slott and Stuart Immonen's Amazing Spider-Man 791, Robbie Robertson offered Peter, under Doc Ock's possession, a new position at the Bugle as a science editor. He wrote and submitted a long dissertation for this position, but when it was analyzed by a plagiarism detector, it became clear it was entirely plagiarized by Doc Ock himself. Peter even lost the job when he got his body back. In Zeb Wells and John Romita Jr.'s Amazing Spider-Man, Norman Osborn, formerly the Green Goblin, regretted his actions as a supervillain and wanted to make amends for his actions. Peter was originally hesitant, but eventually accepted Norman's offer and gave him a costume with upgraded technology. Of course, there could be other career paths Spider-Man had besides photography that I haven't highlighted and I'm not aware of, but that's about it for this video. So what do you guys think? Which career path is your favorite and would like to see adapted in film or animation? Any adjustments you have in mind for improvement? Like I said, I'd like to see Peter get a job as a web designer, mainly because I'd want to show people who don't read much comics that he can have different jobs besides photography. Plus, it naturally makes him more modern. Hopefully we'll see that in Brand New Day, but that's okay if not. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in another video.